This is message number 6, section B in my series, Endtime Babylon. It's entitled More Biblical Evidence That Endtime Babylon is America. Thus far, we have identified 8 rather clear attributes of Endtime Babylon that uniquely reflect America. In this message, I will share 3 more. First, Endtime Babylon will be the world's foremost technology power. We noted at the end of the previous message that Endtime Babylon is predicted to be the world's foremost moral corrupter. This means it would also have to be the world's foremost technology power to spread that influence. Accordingly, in chapter 4 of the book, I write, the technological advancements of the anti-God world also significantly increase its power and its spread over the earth. They make people feel more sufficient and independent from God. And this is why less developed cultures are the least affected by the influences of the world. Technology, of course, can be a good thing, enabling humans to subdue the earth as God commanded in Genesis chapter 1, verse 28. But ever since the Tower of Babel, humanity has perverted technology to gain their independence from God. Satan has always used technology to empower the anti-God world and its influence. Ancient Babylon was the center of human technology in its day. Endtime Babylon will be the primary inventor and supplier of technology to the anti-God world in its day. Accordingly, America has been the primary inventor and supplier of technology to the modern anti-God world today. Again, while America's population is only 4% of the world, it has been the birthplace of 50% of the world's greatest inventions. These include the types of technology that especially empower the anti-God world, including the computer, microchip, internet, and cell phone. No one has developed and spread the technology of the anti-God world like America. And that technology has been used to be the world's foremost moral corrupter, as discussed in the previous message. Next, we will talk about the biblical prediction that Endtime Babylon will be the world's foremost military power. As noted, the description of Endtime Babylon in Revelation chapter 17 through 18 refers primarily to its economic, moral, and cultural attributes. However, descriptions of it also predict its military power. As discussed elsewhere, there's a need to apply the near-far applications of biblical prophecies about Babylon. Therefore, it is suggested that Old Testament descriptions of ancient Babylon's military power will apply to end-time Babylon as well. As will be noted in a moment, these seem supported by implications that can also be made from Revelation chapters 17 through 18. For example, the prophet Jeremiah said ancient Babylon possessed a lofty stronghold, and in the NLT, that means makes her fortifications incredibly strong. Jeremiah chapter 51, verse 53. Clearly, the prophet was referring to the walls of Babylon, one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. The Greek historian Strabo wrote that Babylon's walls were about 65 feet high, the height of a 6-story building. And they were 32 feet thick, wide enough to have chariot races on top of them. Even God referred to Babylon's thick wall and her high gates in Jeremiah 51, verse 58. It seemed the city could not be taken militarily. Likewise, the military defenses of the United States are even more impressive than the walls of Babylon. First, it has been uniquely separated by 2 oceans from potential enemies in the east and west. Secondly, our missile and satellite defense systems are by far the best in the world. America, like ancient Babylon, is a lofty stronghold with a very thick wall defending it. In addition, Jeremiah referred to ancient Babylon as the hammer of the whole earth, chapter 50, verse 23. This is obviously referring to its military power, but a reference to the whole earth goes beyond something completely fulfilled by ancient Babylon. Therefore, it seems Jeremiah is predicting that end-time Babylon will be a military superpower over the entire world. America's military is by far the most powerful in the world. It is also by far the most powerful military that has ever existed in all of human history. It alone could be described, like Babylon, as the hammer of the whole earth. The largest employer in the entire world is the United States Department of Defense. It has almost 3 million employees, including civilians and servicemen and women. Another 1.6 million Americans work in companies that supply the military with everything from weapons to utensils. Its assets include almost 5,000 military sites worldwide in over 160 countries. America is indeed the military hammer of the whole earth. While China and Russia are working very hard to catch up, the United States military is still superior in every way. As of January 2022, America's annual defense expenses were $770 billion. China's was one-third of that at $250 billion, and Russia could only spend one-fifth of America's budget at $154 billion. America spends more money on its military worldwide than the next 10 countries combined. In other words, America has used its superior economic power to become the world's superior military power. As a result, America has almost 2,000 of the most advanced fighter jets in the world. China has a little more than half of that at 1,200, and Russia has about one-third of America's fighters force at about 770, although that's certainly been reduced in its war with Ukraine. America has 11 aircraft carriers. China and Russia each only have 2. As noted above, America has almost 5,000 military sites worldwide in over 160 countries. In 2018, it was reported that Russia operates at least 21 significant military facilities overseas, compared to America's 5,000. In 2017, China established its first overseas military base on the coast of the Horn of Africa. All other countries, including those in Europe, are far behind America in terms of military power. No other nation in the world comes close to being the military hammer of the whole earth, as prophesied about Babylon. Elsewhere, God said to Babylon, "You are my war club, my weapon for battle. With you I shatter nations, with you I destroy kingdoms." Jeremiah chapter 51, verse 20. God used the Babylonians to dethrone Assyria and punish Israel. Likewise, it would seem Endtime Babylon's powerful military would be used by God to punish and restrain evil nations on earth. Accordingly, God has uniquely used America's military as his war club. One resource comments on one example, quote, "In 2003, when America invaded Iraq, it took the U.S. military only about 2 weeks, along with a few enlisted nations in a coalition of the willing, to take apart the world's 5th largest military," unquote. However, the great armies of human history have normally been used to take over territories for one's own possession. But think about what the United States did in World War I, World War II, Korea, and Iraq. It defeated evil foreign foes, but returned the territories it required back to the people living there, including enemies such as Germany, Italy, Japan, and Iraq. No military in history has ever done such a thing. America has done this several times, perhaps because it has been God's war club to restrain evil in the world. It is reasonable to conclude that God personally and intentionally used the American military to defeat a wicked nation like Nazi Germany. It is probable that they would have successfully invaded Great Britain without America's help. Likewise, after World War II, the communist Soviet Union would have probably taken over Europe if it were not for the United States military and its support of NATO. God has uniquely used America's military power as his war club to protect the world from evil forces, matching the biblical prophecy that Endtime Babylon would be God's war club and hammer of the whole earth. But notice that just because God used ancient Babylon's military might to accomplish his purposes, they were not exempt from later being punished by God and destroyed by other wicked nations. It is suggested that such will be the case for America. Predictions in Revelation also support the Old Testament hints of end-time Babylon's military might. First, we read, "The 10 horns or 10-nation end-time coalition that you saw, and the beast, Antichrist, will hate the prostitute, America, and these will permanently remove all people from her and strip her naked, and they will devour her body and will burn her down with fire." Revelation chapter 17, verse 16. Whatever end-time Babylon is, its military is powerful enough that the Antichrist and the 10-nation end-time coalition will believe it must be destroyed before they can rise to rule the world. This could only apply to America for any time in the foreseeable future. This clear understanding of the prophecies in Revelation 13 and 17 were explained previously. Accordingly, can you imagine a world where the America military exists and the whole world will be asking, who is like the beast? Who can wage war against it? And he will have the power to wage war against God's holy people, the saints, and to conquer them and have authority over every tribe, people, language, and nation. Revelation chapter 13. Only if the Antichrist was able to destroy America and its military might would the whole world ask, who can wage war against it? Another indication of the military might of end-time Babylon is that the Antichrist will believe he needs the 10-nation end-time coalition to give their power and authority to the beast, Revelation 17:13, in order to successfully defeat end-time Babylon. The Greek word used here can specifically refer especially to military forces. Therefore, power is a good word to describe the coalition giving the Antichrist the military forces to be able to destroy end-time Babylon. As Anderson notes, quote, "The Antichrist himself dares not attack Babylon the Great until the 10 kings agree to lend him their power and authority for the attack," unquote. This would certainly be true if the Antichrist intended to destroy America. Finally, end-time Babylon's arrogant confidence in its security seems to be an allusion to its military might. God said to ancient Babylon in Isaiah chapter 47, "You said, 'I am forever the eternal queen,' but you did not consider these things or reflect on what might happen. Now then, listen, you lover of pleasure, lounging in your security and saying to yourself, 'I am, and there is no one besides me. I will never be a widow or suffer the loss of children.' Both of these will overtake you in a moment. On a single day, loss of children and widowhood, they will come upon you in full measure." Babylon was lounging in its security because of its military superiority. This is also probably why they boasted, "There is none besides me. I will never be a widow or suffer the loss of children," from being defeated militarily. We discover in Revelation that this was ultimately another Old Testament prophecy about end-time Babylon. Therefore, we read Revelation 18, "She glorified herself. She boasted in her heart, 'I am queen on my throne. I am no helpless widow, and I have no reason to mourn.' Therefore, she will be struck hard with sudden and severe disasters in a single day, death and mourning and famine. She will be burned down with fire." Essentially, end-time Babylon will boast that no one in the world can cause it harm or specifically kill its people. Such security will seem to result from its military superiority in the world. This again would uniquely reflect America. Anderson adds that the boasting and self-glorification being predicted here of end-time Babylon also may be especially reflected in America. Quote, Revelation 18:7 states that Babylon the Great glorified itself to an exceptional degree and proclaimed itself to be a queen who would never be dethroned. Once again, this corresponds well with the way in which politicians and ordinary citizens alike boast of America's greatness and live without any fear of a military invasion or defeat. Even Americans who are not patriotic suffer from the infectious arrogance that comes from enjoying the world's most luxurious standard of living. Most Americans consider all of the world's other countries and cultures to be quite inferior to their own. Few countries have ever glorified themselves like America, unquote. And America's military might is certainly something Americans boast about, find security in, and is another reason to believe that America is fulfilling biblical prophecies describing end-time Babylon. Finally, we will discuss the probability that end-time Babylon will be the world's foremost mixture and uniter of people. It is admitted that the following are the weakest arguments for interpreting end-time Babylon as America. However, when they are combined, they are worth suggesting. In the prophecy concerning end-time Babylon, we read, quote, "The waters you saw where the prostitute sits are peoples, multitudes, nations, and languages," Revelation 17:15. Of course, as noted previously, this refers to end-time Babylon's worldwide political, cultural, and geographical scope. But the reference to where the prostitute sits seems to also refer to the physical location of its particular nation and city. No doubt, the nation, city of end-time Babylon will include an extraordinary mixture of races and people. It will be a concentrated microcosm of the diversity of the entire world. Accordingly, the nations living within it translates a Greek word that basically means foreigners. This interpretation is supported by a similar statement in Jeremiah, where it refers to Babylon as all the foreigners who are in the midst of her, Jeremiah chapter 50, verse 37. As the NASB text note explains, the literal Hebrew here means mixed multitude. However, it is usually translated as foreign people, as it is 3 times in Jeremiah. Therefore, it seems Revelation 17:15 is applying a description of mixed races of people in ancient Babylon to end-time Babylon. This obviously uniquely applies to America. For example, as many as 800 languages are spoken in New York City, making it the most linguistically diverse city in the world. The wider New York City metropolitan statistical area, with more than 20 million people, is ethnically diverse, with the largest foreign-born population of any metropolitan region in the entire world. When the prophecy states that end-time Babylon will sit, where there are peoples, multitudes, nations, and languages, New York City seems to be the best candidate to be a microcosm of the racial, cultural, and linguistic diversity predicted for end-time Babylon. Accordingly, Anderson again writes, quote, "The United States is the only country in the world that contains sizable populations from most parts of every continent. The vast majority of Americans are descended from immigrants. Hence, the motto on the official seal of the United States is E pluribus unum, meaning out of many, one. There are large populations of virtually all races and ethnicities in America. In this sense, the United States is a microcosm of world civilization, unquote. Likewise, Edward Tracy wrote in his book, The United States in Prophecy, quote, another significant clue as to Babylon's identity is to be found in Jeremiah 50:37. Quote, a sword is upon all the mixed multitude that are in the midst of her. The Babylon of the end time is uniquely distinguished by this same characteristic. The United States is the foremost example of a nation where all races are mingled and equal before the law. National origins are unimportant. People have come from every corner of the globe and have become citizens of this country of ours. Which nation of the earth reflects this more than the United States? Tracy asks. Where are you most likely to find English, French, Irish, Scots, Spanish, Portuguese, Scandinavian, Russian, Slav, German, Czech, Armenian, Turk, Greek, African, Oriental, Polynesian, Indian, ad infinitum, all citizens alike in the same country? This is certainly one of the most preeminently distinguishing characteristics of the United States. It is most fitting to apply the clue of a mixed multitude to America alone, unquote. Next, we will discuss the fact that America has the world's foremost population of Jews living in exile. The Babylonian captivity was a major event in Israel's history and is a major topic in the Old Testament prophets. As a result, the greatest population of Jews in the world were at one time in ancient Babylon. Because of the multiple fulfillment nature of biblical prophecy, it is legitimate to seek attributes of end-time Babylon in ancient Babylon. Therefore, it seems worthy of note that both ancient Babylon and America have had the highest populations of Jews living outside of outside of Israel. As of 2020, there were about 6 million Jews living in America. That is second only to Israel itself, where there are a little under 7 million. Of course, the Jews were forced to live in ancient Babylon, but their life there was quite blessed. As you read the following from one researcher, notice the similarities in relationship between Jews and America. Quote, perhaps ancient Babylon's most noble trait was the benevolent treatment of its Judean inhabitants. Unlike other nations, Babylon's policy toward its Jewish captives was one of tolerance and assimilation. The Jewish exiles were encouraged to make a place for themselves in Babylonian society. Some were appointed to high positions in government. Some became wealthy businessmen, and others learned new trades, becoming productive members of society. In consequences of the favorable external circumstances of the exiles, and particularly because they were engaged in the thriving commerce of Babylonia, the Jews' desire to return to Israel gradually disappeared. They learned to content themselves with material prosperity. In the pursuit of prosperity, they conformed to the customs of Babylon and lost their Jewish identity, unquote. Except for the fact that Jews have immigrated to America by choice rather than captivity, America's relationship and influence on Jewish exiles is very similar to ancient Babylon. From the very beginning, America has been a refuge for Jews. In one sense, America has been a tremendous blessing to the Jewish people. There are biblical reasons to believe this is one reason God has blessed America more than any other nation in human history. God said to Abraham, the father of Jews, I will bless those who bless you, and whoever curses you, I will curse. But unfortunately, America has been a moral curse to Jews living in America, and therefore we should not be surprised if God's promise to curse such people is inflicted on it. In the previous message, the morally corrupting influence of America on the Jewish population living in Israel was noted. That corrupting influence has been much, much greater for the Jews living in America. Jewish people in the United States are much more American than Jewish. And because of the worldly values and moral decline of this country, that is something God cannot be pleased with. Again, the prophecy stated God will repay Babylon and all who live in Babylonia for all the corrupting moral wrong they have done in Zion. Is it possible God is angry with how America has uniquely corrupted the Jewish people living in exile outside of Zion in America, just as he was angry for how ancient Babylon morally corrupted his people living in exile there? Finally, let us discuss the fact that America is the world's foremost uniter of languages. The prophecy in Revelation chapter 17 through 18 describes end-time Babylon as the world's most powerful influence over the peoples, multitudes, nations, and languages of the world. The fact that American English is by far the most influential language in the world is another indication that the prophecy is referring to America. And America's influence over the languages of the world may be another reason God will want to punish it. As explained further in chapter 4 of my book, the Tower of Babel was the roots of the anti-God world. God said of this wicked society, nothing they plan to do will be impossible for them. Genesis 11, verse 6. In order to restrain the spread of their worldly rebellion against God, the Lord said, "Come, let us go down and confuse their language so that they will not understand each other." That is why it was called Babel, because there the Lord confused the language of the whole world. The plan worked. They stopped building the city. When the Lord confused the language of the whole world at the Tower of Babel, he intended his act to weaken the power of the anti-God world. But it seems Endtime Babylon's influence over the world's languages will work to reverse God's decree. Accordingly, America's proliferation of English has done more than anything to rebel against God's punishment of ancient Babylon. God essentially proclaimed at the Tower of Babel, "Out of one people, I want many people separated by different languages." But a foundational motto of America is E pluribus unum, which means out of many peoples, there is one people. And the primary force to unite the people both within America and all over the world is English. English is by far the most sought-after language in the world, which is another demonstration of America's worldwide cultural influence. The universal language spoken in Babel thousands of years ago was the last time the earth had such a thing, until rather recently, when America influenced the world to adopt English as a universal language. The confusion of languages was intended by God to be a judgment on the anti-God world to hinder its power. America and its proliferation of English as a universal and united language is clearly spitting in God's face and has uniquely increased the united power of the anti-God world in an unprecedented way, which is one more reason to believe that America is the most reasonable interpretation of what biblical prophecy predicts about end-time Babylon. In the next message, we will answer the question, what city in the world reflects the predicted attributes of end-time Babylon more than any other today or in all of human history?